They were the picture-perfect power couple. Olivia Hayes, a respected philanthropist and soon-to-be mother, and Ethan Sinclair, her billionaire husband, whose charm and success captivated everyone around them. Their love story dazzled the city's elite, a modern-day fairy tale filled with extravagant galas, whispered admiration, and an image of unwavering devotion. But beneath the glitz and carefully curated perfection, a devastating secret lurked, one that would shatter Olivia's world. When Olivia uncovers Ethan's betrayal, she refuses to play the role of the silent, dutiful wife. Instead, she embarks on a relentless pursuit of truth and justice, peeling back the layers of deception that would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone entangled in the facade. Olivia Hayes had been raised in modest comfort but possessed an unshakable spirit. Growing up in the quiet suburban town of Hollowbrook, she learned resilience from her mother, Margaret Hayes, a single parent who worked tirelessly to provide for her only daughter. Though Olivia never knew her father, she never felt deprived of love. Her mother's steady encouragement nurtured her creativity, her fierce independence, and her belief in her own worth. After high school, Olivia set her sights on Kingston University, a prestigious institution known for its cutting-edge economics and social sciences programs. Margaret saved every penny, determined to give Olivia a chance to step into a world where opportunities were abundant and where her compassionate heart could truly shine. It was there, within the ivy-covered walls of Kingston, that Olivia first met Ethan Sinclair, a brilliant economics major whose magnetic presence seemed to electrify every room he entered. Ethan was the kind of man people gravitated toward. His confidence was effortless, his charisma undeniable. He commanded attention in study groups, captivated audiences in lectures, and carried himself with a quiet certainty that made it impossible to ignore him. Rumors swirled about his family's immense wealth, the Sinclair dynasty, a name whispered with admiration and speculation. Yet, Ethan never flaunted his fortune. He was understated, even humble, at least on the surface. Still, his generosity was impossible to miss. He covered the bill at group dinners, bought expensive textbooks for classmates who struggled to afford them, and poured money into philanthropic projects across campus. In Olivia, Ethan saw something rare. A kind-hearted woman with a sharp mind and a relentless drive to make a difference. They began dating in secret during their junior year, their connection deepening over late-night conversations at the library and volunteer work in the city. For Olivia, Ethan was intoxicating. His intelligence, his ambition, his ability to make her feel like the most important person in the world. She never imagined that one day, he would be the person to betray her in the most unforgivable way. He could switch from discussing global financial markets with razor-sharp insight to playfully teasing Olivia about the whimsical doodles in her sketchbook. His charm was effortless, his intellect magnetic. She fell for him completely, believing in the sincerity of his words and his relentless drive to make the world a better place. After graduation, Ethan proposed to Olivia on the rooftop terrace of a newly built 5-star hotel in Crestwood, a luxury establishment he owned, but had never mentioned outright. Under the shimmering glow of the city skyline, he knelt before her, a dazzling diamond ring in hand, and asked her to be his partner in life and love. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she whispered a breathless yes, feeling as if she had stepped straight into the pages of a fairy tale. Their wedding was nothing short of legendary. Socialites, politicians, celebrities, and even high-profile tech moguls flew in from across the country. The Crestwood Times hailed it as the wedding of the decade. The extravagant ceremony boasted an opulent guest list, cascading floral arrangements, and a breathtaking orchestral performance. Margaret Hayes, in a simple yet elegant lace gown, beamed with pride as she watched her daughter embark on this dazzling new chapter. She whispered a silent prayer, that Olivia's life would be filled with the happiness she had always dreamed of. For the first few years, Olivia believed that prayer had been answered. Ethan was a devoted husband, unfailingly supportive of her charitable initiatives. He never seemed too busy for an intimate dinner at home, a quiet weekend getaway, or the simple joys of life together. Their marriage radiated the golden glow of a storybook romance. But fairy tales have a way of unraveling. By the time their third anniversary rolled around, Olivia and Ethan had become Crestwood's golden couple. Though Ethan never flaunted his wealth, his success was impossible to ignore. He had built an investment empire from the ground up, a financial titan that employed thousands across the city. Meanwhile, Olivia had carved her own path, founding a charitable organization that provided scholarships for underprivileged students, resources for struggling single mothers, and grants for aspiring young artists. They were a power couple, admired and envied in equal measure. Yet behind the curtain of perfection, whispers stirred. Rumors swirled that Ethan had political ambitions, that his name was being floated among the city's elite as a potential candidate for office. Olivia had no interest in politics. She cared about the tangible impact of her foundation, the lives she could change. She was content to remain in the background, allowing Ethan to soak in the limelight. And soak it in, he did. He thrived under the attention of Crestwood's wealthiest business moguls, its influencers, its power players. Still, on the surface, everything appeared flawless. Then, after 2 long years of struggling to conceive, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Ethan seemed elated. And Olivia? She glowed with maternal joy, believing, against all odds, that their happily ever after was only just beginning. She had no idea that in reality, the cracks in her fairy tale had already begun to splinter. Yet beneath that glow of happiness, Olivia sensed a shift. Ethan had always been ambitious, but suddenly, he became more guarded. His late nights at the office stretched longer, his business trips became more frequent, always justified by high-stakes board meetings or global investment summits. He returned home, of course, but never fully explained where he'd been. His flight schedules didn't always align with the agenda he shared with her. The details didn't add up. At first, Olivia dismissed these discrepancies, chalking them up to the chaotic nature of high finance. But then came the small signs, the ones she couldn't ignore. Ethan's phone would vibrate at odd hours of the night. He would glance at the screen, shielding it from her eyes before slipping it back into his pocket. Once, Olivia found a stray receipt on the kitchen counter. A lavish dinner for 2, in Rome. The same night Ethan claimed to have been in Berlin for a corporate event. Still, she clung to denial. She was pregnant, overjoyed, and desperate to believe that it was all just a misunderstanding. Yet, the distance between them continued to grow. Ethan began to skip Olivia's charity functions, offering polite but vague excuses about business obligations. When they did attend events together, his smile no longer felt real. She noticed a hardness in his expression when she introduced him to her foundation partners, the students she mentored, or the single mothers her program supported. Meanwhile, his extravagant gifts started arriving with increasing frequency. Diamond bracelets, designer handbags, a pair of rare art prints. To an outsider, these would seem like acts of devotion. But Olivia wasn't fooled. She knew the truth. These weren't gifts of love, they were guilt offerings. During one of Ethan's longest business trips, Olivia started having nightmares. Each dream was the same. She stood alone, heavily pregnant, watching as Ethan walked away, his figure dissolving into the shadows. She would wake up breathless, heart pounding, reaching for him, only to find the bed cold beside her. Insomnia became her companion. She prayed that once Ethan returned, the weight in her chest would disappear. But when he finally walked through the door, something about him had changed. He was physically present, but emotionally, somewhere else. A distant look in his eyes. A casual, half-hearted kiss on her forehead. A mumbled apology for being gone so long. Then he would retreat into his home office for hours, shutting the door behind him. The mansion they shared, once a place of love and laughter, now felt cold, hollow. Her mother, Margaret, tried to reassure her. "He's building an empire, sweetheart. His mind is consumed by it. Trust him, he loves you." But Margaret's soothing words couldn't shake the unease in Olivia's gut. Something deep inside her whispered that Ethan's late nights and endless trips weren't just about business. And soon enough, she would have proof. Then, in a moment of unease and quiet desperation, Olivia did something she once thought unthinkable. While Ethan was out, she picked up his phone. Her hands were cold, clammy, her breath shallow as her thumb hovered over the screen. One simple swipe. That's all it took. A flood of messages filled the screen, each one a dagger aimed straight at her heart. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through a series of texts, not from a business associate, not from an assistant, but from someone named Sophia Caldwell. At first, Olivia's mind grasped for a rational explanation. A colleague? A longtime friend? But the intimate tone, the late-night timestamps, the emoji-laced replies, they spoke volumes. Sophia Caldwell, I can still smell your cologne from last night. Missing you already. Miss you too, darling. Hang tight until I get back. Olivia's chest tightened. A sharp, pulsing ache formed in the pit of her stomach. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept scrolling. Then she saw them, the photos. Selfies of Sophia lounging in lavish hotel suites wrapped in silk sheets. Images of Ethan, his tie loosened, the soft glow of Paris's skyline behind him. The same night he had told Olivia he was in Berlin. Her stomach twisted. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly where their unborn child rested, innocent, unaware. How could he? A swirl of rage, betrayal, heartbreak clashed within her, making her dizzy. She slammed the phone shut, her pulse thundering in her ears. Then footsteps. Ethan stepped into the living room, his face shadowed under the dim glow of the chandelier. He froze when he saw her, tears streaking her cheeks, his phone clenched in her trembling hand. The room turned airless, the tension suffocating. Olivia, he said cautiously. She swallowed hard, her voice unsteady but sharp. Who is Sophia Caldwell? Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it, like a man searching for a lie but finding none. A flicker of guilt passed over his face, only to be swiftly replaced by arrogance. The defiance in his eyes was something she had never seen before. He stepped forward, reaching for the phone, but Olivia jerked back. Tears burned behind her eyes, but they were no longer just sadness. They had hardened into anger, into resolve. I deserve an explanation, she hissed, forcing herself to breathe, to stay steady for the baby. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. It's not what you think, Olivia, he muttered. She's just a business liaison. Sometimes things get a little carried away over text. His voice lacked conviction. Even he didn't believe his own words. And neither did Olivia. Banter? Olivia repeated, her voice sharp, cutting through the heavy silence. Her eyes burned as she glared at Ethan, daring him to justify the indisputable proof in her hands. Does banter explain the photos, Ethan? She snapped. The candlelit dinners in Rome? The nights you swore you were in Berlin? He blinked rapidly, like a man grasping for a lie but failing to catch one. Then, in a moment of desperation, he switched tactics. I have needs, he muttered, his voice cooling into something detached, callous. And you've been so preoccupied with the pregnancy. He never finished. Olivia raised a hand, not to strike him, but to silence him. Her expression alone, a look of pure disgust, was enough to make him stop cold. Something inside her snapped. She would not be disposable. She would not be blamed. Even if Ethan was wealthier than anyone she had ever known, even if he had the power to bury this scandal, she refused to let him twist this into something about her. Don't you dare blame this on my pregnancy, she spat, her voice trembling with fury. I gave you everything, Ethan. I gave you my heart, my loyalty. Her hand drifted to her stomach. And I am carrying our child. You betrayed us. For the first time, Ethan had no words. Defeat flickered in his eyes for just a moment, only to be replaced by entitlement. I'll fix this, he said finally. But the words were hollow, lifeless. Let's just talk it out. You know we can work through this. Olivia stood there, tears carving silent paths down her face. Her mind whirled with heartbreak, betrayal, and the unbearable weight of what she had just uncovered. She wanted to scream. She wanted to collapse, to run, to erase the last few hours from existence. But more than anything, she wanted to protect the life growing inside her. Her voice barely above a whisper, she uttered the words that sealed her decision. I'm filing for divorce. For the first time, she saw something in Ethan's expression. A flicker of panic. It was gone in a second. His arrogance snapped back into place like a mask. He scoffed. Stop being dramatic, he growled, stepping closer. Let's be rational about this. We're the Sinclairs. We have an image to uphold. But Olivia backed away. This wasn't about image. This wasn't about some fairy tale life she was supposed to protect. This was about self-respect. This was about the child she carried. The lies. The charade. It was over. That night, Olivia barely slept. She sat awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. Her hands trembled as she folded clothes, each item a reminder of the life she had built with Ethan. A life now tainted by betrayal. She looked down at her growing belly, gently tracing circles across her skin. Softly, she whispered a promise. "I will keep you safe." In the morning, Ethan knocked on her door. His voice was carefully neutral, as if pretending nothing had happened. "Olivia, I brought you breakfast." When she looked up, he was standing there, holding a plate of fruit and toast, as if a meal could erase the wreckage of what he had done. His expression was strained, yet determined, as if hoping that a single act of kindness could somehow erase his sins. "Let's talk," Ethan said. Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat, her voice sharper than steel. "About what?" she shot back. "How you lied to me, for who knows how long? How you tried to blame your affair on my pregnancy?" Ethan frowned, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "You misunderstood me," he muttered. "I'm not blaming you." Then, with an infuriating matter-of-fact arrogance, he added, "I just needed something you weren't giving me." A wave of disgust rolled through Olivia's stomach. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall in front of him. She had given everything. "I was carrying our child, Ethan," she said, her voice unwavering. "I was physically exhausted, but I was still here. Every day. Building our life together. While you were out parading around the world with another woman." Ethan let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing his temples. "Fine. I made a mistake." Then, as if his betrayal could somehow be reframed, he added, "Let's be honest, Olivia. You enjoyed the lifestyle. The mansion, the vacations, the security. This doesn't have to end our marriage. People in our circles, Olivia, they work through these things." She stared at him in disbelief. This was who he truly was. Not the man she had fallen in love with. Not the man she had built a life with. But a man who believed that money could excuse everything. That loyalty was conditional. That marriage was just another business deal to be negotiated. A deep, overwhelming sadness settled over her. Had she ever really known him? Or had she just believed in the illusion he carefully constructed? Finally, when she spoke, her voice was eerily calm. "I'm going to my mother's house." She picked up her purse, gripping it tightly. "Don't follow me." "I mean it." Ethan ran a frustrated hand through his hair, his jaw clenched. "We can't just—" "It's already done," Olivia cut in. She reached into her bag and held up a business card. A high-profile divorce attorney, recommended by Dr. Lauren Hayes, a psychologist she had once confided in. She had never imagined she would need it. And yet, here she was. Ethan's composure cracked. "Olivia, be reasonable," he muttered, panic flashing in his eyes for the first time. "The media will eat us alive. Do you have any idea how the board will react to a scandal?" But Olivia's expression hardened. Her voice was ice-cold. "You should have thought about that before sleeping with Sophia Caldwell. This is the consequence. And I'd rather face the media storm than live a lie." For the first time, Olivia saw real fear in Ethan's eyes. Not fear of losing her, but fear of losing control, of losing his power, his business, his reputation, his carefully crafted public image. She could see it all playing out in his mind, the headlines, the whispers, the scandal, and for the first time, he was the one left standing in the wreckage. But Olivia, she was walking away. She had a child to protect and a life to rebuild. Let the tabloids write their stories. Let the world gossip. She would face it all, with her head held high. With trembling determination, Olivia grabbed her suitcase and brushed past Ethan, ignoring his pleas. She walked out of the mansion that had once felt like a dream. A fairy tale turned nightmare. Stepping into her car, she hesitated for a brief second, glancing in the rearview mirror. The Sinclair estate stood behind her, massive, luxurious, a symbol of everything she was leaving behind. But now, all she could see was its emptiness, its coldness. A far cry from the warmth and security she had once convinced herself existed within its walls. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then, without another glance, she turned the ignition and merged into the busy streets of Crestwood, forging a new path for herself and her unborn child. The drive felt longer than it should have. But when Olivia finally pulled into the driveway of her mother's modest home, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: relief. The contrast was stark. Margaret Hayes's small, cozy bungalow was worlds apart from Ethan's palatial estate. And yet, this was where she belonged. Not in a marble mansion filled with deceit, but here, surrounded by memories of simpler times. by a warmth that money could never buy. The front door swung open before Olivia could even step out of the car. Margaret's eyes landed on her daughter's tear-streaked face, and within seconds, she was rushing outside. "My baby," she murmured, pulling Olivia into a tight hug, and in that embrace, Olivia broke down. The tears came hard and fast, a flood of emotion she had tried so desperately to contain. Sobs racked her body as she clung to her mother, the weight of betrayal, heartbreak, and exhaustion finally crashing down on her. Inside, they sat together on the worn floral couch, the one Olivia had curled up on as a child, and through broken whispers, she told her mother everything. The affair, the lies, the texts, her decision to file for divorce. Margaret listened, her expression shifting between sorrow and steely resolve. When Olivia finished, her mother reached over and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. "I don't care what happens next," Margaret said. "I'm with you every step of the way." And she meant it. Without hesitation, she cleared out the old guest room, making it a safe space for Olivia. She even brought in a rocking chair, one she had kept in storage for years, an heirloom from Olivia's grandmother. The sight of it made Olivia's chest tighten. She teared up again, but this time it wasn't from grief. It was resolve, because she wasn't alone. She had her mother. She had her unborn child. And she had a future, still unwritten, but hers to create. Meanwhile, in Crestwood, the whispers had already begun. Ethan's business associates heard the rumors. Olivia Hayes had left him, and the world was watching. Some believed it was just a lover's spat. Others suspected something far more serious. The Crestwood Gazette attempted to contact Olivia for a statement. She ignored their calls. She wasn't interested in feeding the media circus. Her focus was on her well-being, on her baby. Meanwhile, Ethan's attempts to reach her grew more frequent and more desperate. Voicemail after voicemail, half-hearted apologies, thinly veiled panic, and of course, the constant reminders of the public relations nightmare they were both facing. Olivia didn't care. She deleted most of them without listening fully. She had no interest in helping Ethan salvage his reputation. That was his problem, not hers. A few days later, Olivia sat across from Jocelyn Maxwell, the attorney recommended by Dr. Lauren Hayes. Jocelyn was petite but had a sharp gaze that suggested nothing got past her. She was known for handling high-profile divorces with ruthless precision. The sleek downtown office was intimidating, but Olivia held her ground. She recounted everything: the affair, the manipulations, the pregnancy, and the tactics she knew Ethan would use to protect himself. Jocelyn listened intently, jotting down notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. When Olivia finished, Jocelyn leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "First," she said, "I'm sorry you're going through this. Second, you are absolutely entitled to full legal protection here. Ethan is a billionaire. We are going to seek a settlement that protects your interests and secures your child's future." Olivia swallowed her nerves. "I'm not after revenge," she admitted. "I just want to be free from him. I need enough security to raise my baby. I've seen how he manipulates situations and I need to make sure we're safe." Jocelyn gave a firm, resolute nod. "I understand completely. I'll file the divorce papers. I'll also contact Ethan's legal team. He will likely try to pressure you into a quick settlement, something that protects him and keeps you silent. Don't sign anything without my approval." For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt something shift inside her. A rush of empowerment. This was her life, and she was taking it back. The storm was just beginning. But for the first time, she felt the faintest flicker of clarity, a glimmer of hope that life could be beautiful again. Over the next few weeks, Olivia felt herself slowly reviving. Living in her mother's home, she reconnected with old friends, people she had lost touch with after marrying Ethan and stepping into his elite social world. She visited her charitable foundation, sitting down with the staff to explain she was taking a temporary leave for personal reasons. The rumors continued to swirl, but Olivia? She didn't hide. With her close colleagues, she was honest. She was done with secrets. She was done with silence. She was done pretending. She was divorcing Ethan Sinclair, and it wasn't amicable. True to form, Ethan flooded her with attempts to change her mind. He sent flowers, sometimes entire bouquets so massive they nearly swallowed her mother's small front porch. He sent apologetic texts filled with empty promises and justifications. And once, he even showed up unannounced. Margaret met him at the door, her expression firm, her voice unwavering. "She doesn't want to see you, Ethan." From behind the curtain, Olivia watched. Ethan stood on the porch, his fists clenched, tension rippling through his shoulders. She couldn't tell if his frustration was over losing her or over losing control. The next morning, the Crestwood Gazette published a headline, "Ethan Sinclair's Marriage in Peril. Clues point to rocky times ahead." The article hinted at infidelity, but never confirmed it outright. Still, seeing her private heartbreak become public fodder was a gut punch. But Olivia reminded herself why she had chosen this path. The path of honesty. The path of self-respect. The media storm was just an unfortunate byproduct. During her downtime, Olivia focused on nourishing her mind and body. She took slow walks around the quiet streets of Hollowbrook, gazing at the familiar houses she had once raced past as a child. It wasn't glamorous, but it offered her something Ethan's world never could: a sense of belonging. She prepared healthy meals, determined to give her unborn child the best start possible. And one day, unexpectedly, she ran into Jacob Morrison, an old classmate from high school. Jacob had been a close friend, someone who had known her before her world became wrapped in wealth, power, and deception. Now he worked at a local community center, running programs for at-risk youth. The moment he saw her, recognition flashed in his eyes. After a bit of small talk, his face softened with concern. "I heard you moved back," he said gently. "Is everything okay?" Olivia took a deep breath. She hadn't expected to run into someone who had known her before Ethan, before the mansion, before the headlines. "I'm going through a separation," she admitted, "and it's complicated." Jacob's gaze briefly flicked to her pregnant belly, then back to her face. And then, without pity, without any ulterior motive, he simply smiled. "I'm sorry to hear that. If you ever need a friend or just a place to breathe, the community center is always open. We've got yoga classes, cooking demos. Sometimes it's just nice to be around people doing good things." His sincerity caught Olivia off guard. It had been so long since she had felt genuine friendship, uncomplicated by money, power, or expectations. Before she could stop herself, she agreed to visit the center. And when she did, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Children laughing, teenagers painting murals, volunteers teaching life skills. A world that was simple, kind, and real. A world she wanted to be a part of again. She felt a spark of inspiration, a reminder of her own passion for helping others. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia focused on building a new routine. She refused to let her pregnancy be overshadowed by Ethan's betrayal. Instead, she poured herself into taking control of her life. She researched prenatal care options in Hollowbrook, ultimately choosing a small but highly reputable clinic, one that catered to everyday families, rather than the exclusive, high-end private hospital Ethan had once insisted upon. Surrounded by ordinary people facing real struggles, Olivia felt grounded. And unbeknownst to her, something was shifting in the air. Events were aligning. A new source of hope was about to enter her life, one that might just lead her toward the love she never thought she'd find again. Several weeks into her new routine, Jacob invited Olivia to attend a fundraising gala at the community center. The event was meant to raise money for after-school programs and career training initiatives. At first, Olivia hesitated, partly because her energy levels dipped some days, but also because public gatherings reminded her of her old life with Ethan. The flashing cameras, the stiff, forced conversations, the mask she had worn for so long. But Jacob's genuine enthusiasm and the importance of the cause convinced her to go. On a crisp Friday evening, Olivia arrived at the community center. To her surprise, it had been transformed into a warm, lively venue. The decorations were modest but heartfelt. Colorful banners, homemade centerpieces, and a small stage where local youth performed music numbers. She noticed the differences immediately. This was nothing like Ethan's lavish soirees with crystal chandeliers and ice sculptures. There were no black-tie dress codes, no empty displays of wealth. Here, people wore simple but stylish outfits, more concerned with the cause than with appearances. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt comfortable. Jacob greeted her warmly, introducing her to the staff and volunteers. Then at one point, he gestured to a tall, well-built man with kind gray eyes. "Olivia, meet Carter Harrington," Jacob said. "He's been a major donor and mentor for our entrepreneurship program." Carter extended a hand with a friendly smile. Olivia recognized the name immediately. She had once read about him in a philanthropic newsletter, a man known for quietly funding grassroots education programs. He had done exceptionally well in the tech industry, but had avoided the limelight, choosing instead to keep his philanthropic work under the radar. "Pleasure to meet you, Olivia," Carter said, his gaze briefly drifting to her baby bump. He motioned toward a nearby seat. "Can I get you anything? Water? Maybe some food?" She let out a soft laugh. "I'm fine, thank you. Just a little winded from walking around." Carter nodded, then asked, "Jacob tells me you have a passion for philanthropy. Are you involved in the Crestwood philanthropic circuit? I feel like I've seen your name before." For a brief moment, Olivia hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Jacob. Had he told Carter about her situation? Had the rumors already reached him? Taking a breath, she answered honestly, "I was, until recently." And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again. "I'm focusing on a more personal level now," Olivia said, offering a small smile, "especially with the baby on the way. But maybe sometime I can tell you about the educational scholarship programs I used to run." Carter's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "I'd like that very much," he said. Throughout the evening, Olivia watched Carter as he moved effortlessly among the crowd, greeting donors and encouraging them to support the center. But unlike the men she had known in Ethan's world, Carter wasn't flashy. There were no arrogant displays of wealth, no boasting. Instead, he shared stories about the kids he had mentored, the progress they had made, the challenges they had faced and overcome. It was refreshing, so different from the calculated, high-society performances she had once endured. Later, as the event wound down, Jacob pulled her aside, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Carter asked if you're free for coffee sometime," he murmured, raising his eyebrows playfully. Olivia laughed, but felt the heat of a soft blush creeping up her cheeks. She reminded herself, she was in the middle of a divorce, pregnant with another man's child. The last thing she needed was romantic complications. And yet, she couldn't deny that she felt a certain ease around Carter. Perhaps it was his unpretentious nature, or the genuine kindness in his eyes. He didn't look at her like a scandal-ridden socialite. He looked at her like a person. And that felt good. As she prepared to leave, Carter approached her with a gentle smile. "I hope tonight wasn't too overwhelming. I know how these events can get." Olivia shook her head. "No, actually, it was wonderful," she admitted. "It reminded me why I loved philanthropy in the first place." Carter hesitated for a moment, then said, "If you ever want to exchange ideas about helping the community, maybe over a cup of tea or coffee, I'd be happy to." And then he left it at that. No pressure, no expectations, just an invitation, a small space for her to decide. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt something stir inside her. A quiet spark, something missing for far too long. "I'd like that, Carter," she said softly. And just like that, a small but undeniable shift began. But as Olivia cautiously explored this growing friendship, Ethan was making his next move. Through his lawyers, he launched a series of aggressive counteractions to regain control of the situation. He contested nearly every clause in Olivia's initial divorce filing. He insisted on strict privacy clauses, ones that would forbid her from ever speaking publicly about his affair. And most shocking of all, he demanded shared custody of the unborn child. Even though Olivia's legal team argued that custody arrangements for an unborn child were premature, the relentless legal battles weighed heavily on her mind. She met with Jocelyn Maxwell often, reviewing every new motion Ethan's team filed. Jocelyn, always cool and composed, reassured Olivia. "Don't worry. This is a standard intimidation tactic in high-stakes divorces." But Olivia couldn't help feeling distressed. Every legal threat was a reminder of Ethan's power. And every court filing felt like a fresh wound, reopening the heartbreak he had caused. One afternoon, as Olivia stepped out of Jocelyn's office, she froze. Ethan was waiting in the parking lot. He stood beside his sleek black luxury sedan, arms folded, face etched with determination. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly squared her shoulders. She refused to be intimidated. Ethan approached her calmly, though there was a barely contained edge to his voice. "We need to talk," he said. Olivia shook her head. "We have nothing to talk about. Let my lawyer handle it." His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with anger. "Don't be so stubborn," he snapped. I'm offering you a settlement that will make you more than comfortable. I've instructed my team to ensure you receive a generous payout and child support." Then, with careful precision, he added, "All I'm asking is that you sign a non-disclosure agreement about everything that happened." Olivia's stomach twisted. She understood exactly what he meant. This wasn't about making things right. Ethan wanted to protect his public image at all costs. If she signed that NDA, she would be legally bound to never speak about his affair, his deception, the trauma he had inflicted upon her. Olivia met his gaze head-on. "I'm not for sale, Ethan." For the first time, frustration flashed across his face. Something real, something desperate. "Damn it, Olivia, don't make this harder than it has to be," he growled. "You know how the press will spin this. They'll tear us both apart." She inhaled sharply. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not waver. "Let them. I'd rather speak my truth than live a lie." For a brief second, his composure cracked. His eyes flickered, a strange mix of regret and defiance. But before he could retort, the office door swung open. Jocelyn stepped out, her sharp gaze pinning Ethan in place. "Mr. Sinclair," she said coolly, "your presence here constitutes harassment. Please refrain from contacting my client outside of legal channels." Ethan's face hardened. With a scowl, he turned away. Olivia watched as he slid into his car, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. For a fleeting moment, she caught a glimpse of the man she had once loved. Confident, proud, certain of his power. But now he was bristling at the loss of control. With a final roar of the engine, he sped away. And Olivia? She stood her ground, unshaken, unbreakable. Jocelyn placed a reassuring hand on Olivia's shoulder. "He won't give up easily," she warned, her voice steady. "But you have the law on your side. Don't let him bully you." Olivia nodded, though tears threatened to spill. She swallowed hard, reminding herself she wasn't alone in this battle. She had her family, she had her lawyer, and she had a growing circle of new allies. But most importantly, she had herself and an unwavering drive to protect the life growing inside her. Amidst the legal chaos, Olivia found solace in the moments she spent with Carter. What started as a one-time coffee meetup slowly turned into a regular pattern. Once a week, they would grab lunch or tea at a quaint little cafe near the community center. Sometimes they'd discuss fundraising ideas, or Olivia would share her experiences running her former foundation. Other times, they simply talked about life. Favorite books, childhood memories, random hobbies. Each conversation felt like a breath of fresh air. Carter had an easygoing warmth, a presence that made Olivia feel safe. He often asked about the baby. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything?" But unlike Ethan, he never tried to overshadow her or fix her problems with money. Instead, he simply listened, offering thoughtful suggestions only when asked. At first, Olivia tried to maintain an emotional distance. She was aware of her vulnerabilities, newly separated, pregnant, legally entangled in a high-profile divorce. The last thing she wanted was to fall into a rebound relationship. And yet, despite her attempts to keep things strictly friendly, she couldn't deny the gentle flutter in her chest whenever Carter smiled. How her worries seemed to lighten after spending time with him. One evening, after a particularly stressful day of legal meetings, Olivia found herself outside the community center. Carter had invited her to watch a group of teenagers pitch their small business ideas, a sort of mini entrepreneurship fair. She planned to stay for just an hour, but ended up staying long after the presentations ended, chatting with the enthusiastic teens. They reminded her of herself years ago, idealistic, hopeful, longing to make a difference. Afterward, Carter walked her to her car. A cool breeze rustled the leaves overhead. Olivia hugged her coat around her belly, feeling Carter's concerned gaze on her. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Just tired." He nodded, his expression kind. "I can drive you home if you need." She smiled, touched by his offer. "I have my car, but thank you, Carter." And for the first time in a long while, she felt lighter. Not because her troubles were gone, but because, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was facing them alone. Carter hesitated, then reached into his pocket, pulling out a small silver keychain shaped like a sunflower. "I got this at a crafts fair recently," he said, his voice slightly sheepish. "It reminded me of you, your optimism. I guess it's just a token, but I thought maybe it'd bring you a little cheer." The gesture was simple, yet it meant more to Olivia than he could have known. She gently took the keychain, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." For a moment they stood there, bathed in the soft glow of a street lamp, the night quiet around them. Olivia's heartbeat quickened. There was an unspoken connection, a tenderness that went beyond friendship, but she also felt the weight of reality pressing down on her. She was still married, still pregnant, still caught in the whirlwind of a scandal. So she simply smiled softly, whispered her thanks, and got into her car. As she drove home, the silver sunflower keychain glinted on the seat beside her. A small symbol of hope. That maybe, just maybe, there was a second chance for happiness waiting for her. After all of this heartache, weeks turned into a month, and Olivia's pregnancy advanced steadily. She felt the baby kicking now. A comforting reminder that amidst all the turmoil, a new life was forming. A life she vowed to protect at any cost. But as the date for the divorce hearing loomed, tensions escalated on all fronts. Ethan's lawyers used every tactic in the book. They accused Olivia of trying to alienate the unborn child from its father. They insinuated that she was emotionally unstable. They even hinted that Ethan might fight for full custody once the baby was born. Olivia's legal team fought back just as hard. They presented evidence of Ethan's affair, his prolonged absences, and his questionable behavior. This wasn't about a father wanting to be present. This was about control, and Olivia refused to let him win. The hearing took place in a grand courtroom in downtown Crestwood. Outside, media cameras swarmed, capturing every arrival. As Jocelyn pulled up, Olivia took a deep breath. One hand rested on her belly, the other clung to Jocelyn's arm for support. As she stepped out of the car, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing. She kept her gaze down, refusing to engage. She was here to fight for her future. Inside, Ethan was already seated at the defendant's table, flanked by two expensive-looking attorneys. He gave Olivia a curt nod as she entered, but his expression was grim. Gone was any trace of the affectionate husband she had once known. This was a battle now, and he was ready to fight dirty. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, called the session to order. Jocelyn presented a compelling argument. Olivia deserved a fair settlement given Ethan's massive assets. Any custody arrangement should be made with the child's best interests in mind. And most importantly, the baby wasn't even born yet. But Olivia knew. This was just the beginning, and she would have to fight harder than ever to win. The baby was born. Linda collapsed back against the hospital bed, her body exhausted, her mind overwhelmed, but her heart full. The sound of a newborn's cry filled the room, piercing through the pain, through the fear, through everything she had endured. Tears spilled down her cheeks as a nurse gently placed the tiny bundle in her arms. A rush of love, fierce and unbreakable, surged through her. This was what she had fought for. This small, perfect life, her child, her new beginning. Catherine sobbed softly beside her, stroking Linda's hair. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. Linda smiled through her tears, her gaze locked on her baby. "We did it." 2 weeks earlier, in the courtroom, Jocelyn had delivered a powerful argument, citing not only Andrew's infidelity but the emotional distress Linda had suffered due to his actions. Andrew's lead attorney dismissed the claims, insisting that his personal affairs were irrelevant to his ability to parent. Mr. Morgan has the financial means to provide a stable life for the child, something Ms. Parker cannot match independently. Then, in a veiled attack, he suggested that Linda was being manipulated by lawyers looking for a payday. Through it all, Linda remained composed, even as her heart pounded in her chest. She refused to let Andrew's team paint her as a gold digger or an unfit mother. She had her truth, and she clung to it. After hours of back-and-forth arguments, the judge delivered her preliminary ruling. Linda was entitled to a substantial settlement, given the nature of her marriage and Andrew's admitted infidelity. Any custody decisions would be tabled until after the baby was born. Both parents were expected to prioritize the child's well-being over their own reputations. Andrew's attorney bristled, but the gavel came down, ending the discussion. A weight lifted from Linda's chest. The divorce wasn't finalized that day, but the judge's decision signaled victory. Most importantly, she felt validated in her stand against Andrew's manipulations. Outside the courthouse, the media was relentless. Microphones were shoved toward her face, cameras flashing, reporters shouting, "Linda, do you have a statement?" She met their stares calmly, steadily. "I trust the legal system to do what's right for me and my child." Then, she stepped into Jocelyn's car and drove away from the chaos, clinging to the hope that freedom was finally within reach. Weeks later, the contractions came too soon. Linda's heart raced as panic gripped her. "It's too early," she whispered, gripping the kitchen counter. Catherine didn't hesitate. She rushed Linda to the hospital, where doctors confirmed what she already knew. She was in preterm labor. They tried to slow it down, giving the baby more time to develop. But some things are out of our control. Some things are meant to happen when they're meant to happen. As night fell, Linda lay in the hospital bed, her hand clutching Catherine's, her body shaking with anxiety. She tried to focus on her breathing, recalling the prenatal classes she had taken. The hours dragged on, and then it was time. The baby was determined to make an entrance. Labor was intense, but Linda's resolve was fiercer. With every push, she thought about Andrew's betrayal, the legal battles, the public scrutiny, everything she had endured, and with one final pain-filled effort, her baby was here. And in that moment, everything changed. She heard the first cry of her child, a tiny, premature but vibrant baby boy. The sound unleashed a wave of love and relief so powerful that Linda burst into tears. "He's here," Catherine whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Linda cradled her newborn son, tears streaming down her cheeks. He was small, fragile in her arms, but the doctors assured her that he was strong. With a little extra care in the neonatal unit, he was expected to thrive. In those delicate first moments, Linda felt an overwhelming sense of protection and purpose. This child, her child, represented a new beginning, a life unburdened by the darkness of the past. She named him James Parker Morgan, a nod to her family heritage, but also an acknowledgement of Andrew's paternal role, despite everything. News of the baby's early arrival quickly reached Andrew. He contacted Linda's hospital room, requesting to see his son, but she declined. She was still reeling from the birth, from the exhaustion, from the sheer rawness of everything. More than anything, she feared the emotional stress his presence might bring. For now, her focus was entirely on James, monitoring his health, offering the warmth of a mother's embrace, and ensuring he felt safe. Carter heard about the birth from Jacob. A few hours later, a small bouquet of white lilies arrived at the hospital, along with a simple note, "Congratulations on your brave little fighter, wishing you both health and happiness." Linda smiled as she read it, a gentle warmth filling her chest. She hadn't told Carter much about Andrew's legal battles or the custody fight ahead. She didn't want to burden him. And yet, his simple, quiet thoughtfulness reminded her that she wasn't alone in this world. Over the next few days, Linda watched James grow stronger in the neonatal unit. The doctors were optimistic, and soon, she was finally able to hold him against her chest, skin to skin, feeling the soft rhythm of his tiny heartbeat against hers. The future was far from settled. The divorce battle loomed ahead. And Andrew? She knew he would try to exert his rights as James's father. But for now, Linda allowed herself to simply be a mother, to breathe, to exist in the bliss of new motherhood. Each time she looked into James's tiny face, she sensed a silent but resolute message. We survived this, and we will continue to rise above whatever comes next. The months that followed life gradually settled into a new rhythm. Linda remained at her mother's house, adjusting to the joys and challenges of caring for a newborn. The legal battle with Andrew dragged on, his attorneys continuing to press for custody arrangements. But every time Linda looked into James's wide, curious eyes, she felt a renewed strength. She would fight for him. She would protect him, no matter what it took. Carter, ever mindful of Linda's delicate situation, kept a respectful distance. But still, he checked in regularly. He sent encouraging texts. He left small surprises on the front porch. A book on parenting, a box of herbal tea, a note reminding her that she was doing an incredible job. Nothing overbearing, nothing that felt like an obligation. Just kindness. And in those quiet moments, Linda realized something. She wasn't just fighting for freedom. She wasn't just reclaiming her life. She was slowly stepping towards something new. Something that felt like peace. Something that, just maybe, felt like hope. Carter's small gifts for baby James never felt extravagant. Handmade blankets, children's storybooks from local artisans, simple gestures, yet they meant everything. Unlike Andrew's grandiose displays of wealth, Carter's kindness came with no expectations, no conditions, just care, just sincerity. Each act of thoughtfulness touched Linda deeply. It was a world apart from what she had known before. As Linda regained her strength, she gradually resumed her community work. She began volunteering again at the local center, sometimes even bringing James in his stroller. The teenagers who had once stood before her pitching their business ideas were thrilled to meet him. They gathered around, gazing at his tiny face, waving playfully. Jacob teased her often. "I think you've got the youngest fan club in town, Linda." She only laughed, relishing these wholesome connections. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly at home. One crisp autumn afternoon, Carter arrived at the community center with an announcement. A new initiative, a tech-based scholarship program for young entrepreneurs. Linda sat at the back of the room, James nestled in her arms, listening intently. As Carter spoke, he emphasized the power of mentorship, of bridging gaps in resources, of nurturing ambition in underserved communities. Linda couldn't help but notice. Every word he spoke carried sincerity, passion, integrity, hope. This was a man who believed in second chances, in new beginnings. After the event, Carter approached her, his eyes lighting up at the sight of James. "He's getting so big," he remarked, reaching out to gently touch the baby's tiny hand. James responded by gripping Carter's finger, his tiny grasp surprisingly strong. They both laughed. Linda felt a flutter in her chest. She had built walls around her heart, crafted from betrayal, distrust, and pain. But standing here now, watching Carter smile at her son, something shifted. "He's doing really well," she said, smiling. "I'm so grateful." Carter hesitated. Then in a soft, careful voice he asked, "Would you like to grab a late lunch? Or maybe just a walk in the park? I'd love to catch up, see how you're doing." Linda glanced at James. He had already drifted off to peaceful sleep in his stroller. Then she looked back at Carter. The old fear crept in. Was it too soon? Was she ready? Her divorce was still pending, her heart still healing. But then she reminded herself, this was not Andrew. This was a man who respected her boundaries, who supported her purpose, who had never once pressured her for anything. A man she could trust. So she took a deep breath and nodded. A walk in the park sounds wonderful. They strolled through Maplewood Park, the crisp breeze fluttering the golden leaves around them. James gurgled contentedly in his stroller, calmness, and for the first time in years, Linda felt something unexpected. Peace. As they walked through the quiet park, Linda finally let herself open up. She spoke about her worries, about raising James alone, about the custody battle still looming over her, about her fear that Andrew might use his wealth to manipulate the legal system. Carter didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, with understanding, with kindness, with empathy. And in that gentle moment, as Linda watched Carter interact warmly with her son, something shifted inside her. She no longer felt weighed down by Andrew's betrayal. Her divorce wasn't finalized yet. There were still battles ahead. But she had come so far from the broken woman who had once discovered those damning texts on Andrew's phone. She had rebuilt herself. She had found a better love, not just someone to romanticize her, but someone who proved through action that kindness and authenticity still existed in this world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Carter turned to her, his eyes warm, steady. "I care about you, Linda." His voice was gentle, certain. "I'm not pushing you for anything more than friendship right now. But I want you to know I'm here, for you, for James, whenever you need me." A tender warmth coursed through her. Without overthinking it, she reached out, squeezing his hand, her voice soft with gratitude. "Thank you, Carter." A pause. Then, "I care about you too." In that quiet confession, Linda took a leap of faith. Not just toward Carter, but toward a brighter future. A future not defined by betrayal and heartbreak, but by hope, by resilience, by the promise of genuine love. She had walked through the fire, and she had come out stronger on the other side, ready to embrace whatever life held for her and her precious son. Thank you for following Linda's journey, a story marked by betrayal and heartbreak, yet ultimately illuminated by courage, hope, and the discovery of love. If you've been captivated by this drama of high-stakes infidelity, hidden secrets, and a mother fighting for her child's future, we invite you to show your support. Like this video. Share it with your friends who love dramatic real-life fiction. Subscribe to our channel for more riveting stories of survival, transformation, and unstoppable resilience. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you powerful narratives. Stories that remind us, no matter how dark the road may seem, there is always a new dawn waiting on the horizon. Stay tuned, stay hopeful, and never forget, you deserve a love that honors you exactly as you are.
Millionaire left his pregnant wife with nothing, but her comeback stunned everyone. The rain fell in punishing sheets against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, mirroring the cold cascade of Damon's words. "It's over, Sienna." He stood by the marble fireplace, a silhouette of immense wealth and chilling indifference. His voice, usually a warm baritone that had once promised her the world, was now flat, sterile. "The car will be here in 15 minutes to take you. Wherever it is you go now." He didn't look at her, not at her face, not at the slight 5-month curve of her belly where their son was growing. He simply erased her from his life with the casual cruelty of a god swatting a fly. Life with Damon Croft had always felt like living inside a snow globe. From the outside, it was a fantasy of glittering perfection. Their penthouse apartment in San Francisco's Pacific Heights was a testament to his soaring success in the tech world. A minimalist expanse of glass, steel, and Italian marble that offered a panoramic god's-eye view of the city, from the Golden Gate Bridge to the distant shimmer of Alcatraz. Every object within it was curated, expensive, and untouchable. Sometimes Sienna felt like one of those objects. She had met him 2 years ago, a whirlwind romance that felt more like an acquisition. She was a quiet librarian, content with her small apartment in the Mission District, her worn paperbacks, and her dreams of one day opening a small bakery. He was Damon Croft, the charismatic boy genius who had turned a single brilliant algorithm into a billion-dollar empire, Croft Analytics. He'd walked into her library branch seeking a rare edition of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and his focus, so intense and absolute, had turned from the book to her. He pursued her with the same relentless drive he applied to his business ventures. There were Michelin-star dinners, helicopter rides to Napa Valley, and spontaneous trips to Paris. He'd listened, truly listened, to her dreams, her fears, her stories of a childhood spent in a cramped, loving home smelling of her grandmother's cinnamon buns. He made her feel seen in a way she never had before. But looking back, she realized he had seen her as a project, a beautiful, untamed thing to be polished and placed within his perfect world. He encouraged her to quit her job. "A woman like you shouldn't be bound by 9 to 5, he'd murmured, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Your only job is to be happy, to be mine." And she, so in love, had agreed. Her world had shrunk, its borders defined by the walls of the penthouse and the exclusive social circles he moved in. His family was an extension of his world, polished, powerful, and polite to a chilling degree. His mother, Victoria Croft, was the matriarch of San Francisco old money, a woman whose pearls seemed to be clenched as tightly as her jaw. Victoria's approval was a currency Sienna could never seem to earn. Her compliments were always backhanded. "That dress is lovely, dear. Such a brave choice for your figure." Or, "It's remarkable how quickly you've adapted. You're a testament to Damon's good taste." Damon's younger sister, Ivy, was different, or so Sienna thought. Ivy had a warmth that seemed genuine, a quick, conspiratorial smile. She would often take Sienna shopping, helping her navigate the treacherous waters of high society fashion. "Don't mind Mother," Ivy would say, squeezing her hand. "She's from a different era. She just wants to see Damon happy, and you make him happy." Sienna clung to Ivy's friendship, a rare lifeline in the opulent isolation of her new life. Yet even in the golden cage, there were whispers of unease. Damon had a temper that flared and vanished as quickly as a lightning strike. A sharp word, a slammed door, a sudden, unnerving silence. He was possessive, needing to know her whereabouts at all times, his calls and texts a constant tether. At the time, she'd mistaken it for passion, for a deep, abiding love. She didn't see it for what it was: control. The gilded bars of her cage were so beautiful, she hadn't realized she was a prisoner until the door was slammed shut behind her. He's like a Disney prince, but with better stock options, Juno had joked when Sienna first introduced them. Juno was her opposite, a riot of colorful tattoos and paint-splattered jeans, a struggling artist who saw the world in shades of truth Sienna often missed. They had been best friends since college, their bond forged over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza. As the months turned into a year, Juno's jokes became tinged with concern. She was the one person from Sienna's old life who refused to be edited out of the new one. She would visit the penthouse, her scuffed combat boots a defiant statement on the pristine white rugs. "I don't know, Si," Juno said one afternoon, sipping a beer Damon would have deemed pedestrian, while Sienna had her requisite Pellegrino. "There's something off. It's like he's always performing. He's just charismatic, Juno. He's in the public eye," Sienna defended, a familiar prickle of defensiveness rising. "No, it's more than that. The way he watches you. It's not like he's looking at you. It's like he's checking his investment. And his family. They look at you like you're a Fabergé egg they're afraid you'll drop." Sienna had brushed it off. What did Juno know of this world? How could she understand the pressure Damon was under, the complexities of his life? But the words lingered, planting a tiny seed of doubt. She remembered their first date, a stark contrast to the opulence that now defined her life. He had taken her to a small, family-owned Italian restaurant in North Beach, the kind with checkered tablecloths and Chianti in wicker baskets. He had seemed almost normal. He talked about his own modest upbringing, a story he rarely repeated now. He claimed his father was a history professor and his mother a homemaker, that his genius was a fluke that had catapulted him into a world he was still learning to navigate. It was a story designed to disarm her, to make him seem relatable, to bridge the chasm between their financial realities. He'd swept her off her feet with a carefully constructed narrative. He was the self-made man, the brilliant outsider who needed her grounding influence. He'd found a hole in her heart, the quiet loneliness of a girl who had lost her parents too young and was raised by a loving but frail grandmother, and he had filled it with a fantasy. He isolated her so slowly, so masterfully, that she hadn't noticed. First, it was gentle suggestions. "That part of town isn't safe, my love. Let me send a car for you." Then, "Juno seems a bit rough around the edges, don't you think? Maybe it's best if we host her here." He had curated her life until it was unrecognizable, until the only reflection she saw was the one he wanted to see. Beautiful, docile, and utterly dependent. The power imbalance had been there from the very beginning, a fault line hidden beneath a city of dreams. The day she told Damon she was pregnant should have been the happiest of her life. She'd planned it meticulously, a small, intimate celebration of the future they were building. She'd prepared his favorite meal, beef Wellington, the table set with the baccarat crystal they'd received as a wedding gift. She placed the positive pregnancy test in a small, velvet-lined box, her heart thrumming with a nervous, joyful energy. He arrived late, smelling of expensive whiskey in the cold night air. His smile was tight, his eyes distant. He barely touched his food. "What is it, Sienna? You've been staring at me all night." Her own smile faltered. She slid the small box across the table. "I have a surprise for you." He opened it, his expression unreadable. He stared at the test for a long, silent moment. Sienna held her breath, waiting for the explosion of joy, for him to sweep her into his arms. Instead, a glacial coldness settled in his eyes. "I see," he said, placing the box back on the table with a quiet click. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a look of appraisal, of cold, hard calculation. "Aren't you happy?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Happy is a simplistic emotion, Sienna," he replied, standing up and walking to the window, his back to her. "This complicates things." From that night on, the slow unraveling began. The emotional distance became a chasm. He slept in one of the guest rooms, claiming he had to take late-night calls with international partners and didn't want to disturb her. His phone, which had once been left casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually in his pocket, angled away from her, its screen dark. His nights at the office grew longer and more frequent. The man she loved was disappearing, replaced by a cold, efficient stranger who moved through their home like a ghost. The intimacy they had shared, both physical and emotional, vanished completely. When she tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing gap, he would deflect with practiced ease. "You're being hormonal, darling. It's the pregnancy." Or, "I'm under immense pressure at work. You wouldn't understand." The gaslighting was so subtle, so effective, that she began to doubt her own sanity. Was it her? Was she the one pushing him away with her needs, her emotions, her pregnancy? The loneliness was a physical ache, a hollow space in her chest that grew larger with each passing day. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Sienna was now 5 months pregnant, the gentle curve of her belly a constant, visible reminder of the life growing inside her and the love that was dying around her. Damon was supposedly in Tokyo for a tech summit, but a gut feeling, a primal instinct she could no longer ignore, told her something was wrong. She had never dared to pry into his private affairs. His office in the penthouse was his sanctuary, a space she was tacitly forbidden from entering. But that day, driven by a desperate need for truth, she found the door unlocked. The room was as sterile as the rest of the apartment, dominated by a massive desk and a bank of monitors. She didn't know what she was looking for. A letter? A photo? A clue to the identity of another woman? Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sat in his leather chair, the scent of his cologne clinging to the air. She moved the mouse, and the main monitor flickered to life. He hadn't logged out. There were no love letters, no incriminating photos. There were spreadsheets, financial documents, and encrypted folders with names that meant nothing to her. Project Nightingale, the Sterling Agreement, Legacy Protocol. Curiosity warred with fear. She clicked on a folder labeled SM Assets, her initials, Sienna Monroe. Inside were documents that made her blood run cold. They weren't love notes. They were contracts. A prenuptial agreement far more ruthless and detailed than the one she had signed. Background checks on her, her family, even on Juno. Financial analyses of what she had been worth before she met him. It was all there, in black and white. She wasn't his wife. She was an asset, a carefully selected, low-risk acquisition. Just as she was trying to process the horrifying reality, she heard the whisper, quiet hum of the private elevator opening. Panic seized her. She tried to close the folders, her hands shaking so violently she could barely control the mouse. Damon walked in. He wasn't in Tokyo. He was dressed in a casual cashmere sweater, and he wasn't alone. His mother, Victoria, was with him. They both stopped dead in the doorway, their faces masks of cold fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Damon's voice was lethally quiet. Tears streamed down Sienna's face as she gestured wildly at the screen. "What is this, Damon? Project Nightingale? What have you done?" He didn't answer. He strode to the desk and slammed the laptop shut. The ensuing argument was a blur of a nightmare. He didn't shout. He dissected her, his words precise and cruel. He turned everything back on her. Her paranoia, her snooping, her ingratitude. "I gave you everything," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "A life you couldn't have dreamed of. And you repay me by digging through my private things like a common thief?" "She was never suited for this life, Damon," Victoria added, her voice dripping with venom. She looked at Sienna's pregnant belly with undisguised contempt. "This little complication proves it." The word complication struck Sienna like a physical blow. She realized then that they weren't a family on the verge of welcoming a new life. They were a corporation managing a crisis. The final scene played out against the backdrop of a brewing storm. The sky outside had turned a bruised purple gray. Damon, flanked by his mother, stood before her. No longer her husband, but a judge delivering a sentence. This was the scene from the beginning, the memory that would forever be seared into her mind. The rain lashing against the windows, the cold finality in his voice. "It's over, Sienna," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The marriage was a mistake, a business arrangement that you, it seems, fundamentally misunderstood." The phrase business arrangement hung in the air, grotesque and obscene. Her entire life, their love, their unborn child, all reduced to a line item on a balance sheet. I have been more than generous, he continued, his tone clinical. He gestured to a sleek black envelope on the coffee table. There's a severance. Enough for you to start over quietly. Numbness gave way to a surge of white-hot rage. She picked up the envelope. She could feel the thickness of the check inside. A payoff. Hush money. With a guttural sob, she ripped it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the floor like dead leaves. I don't want your money, she choked out, her voice raw. I want to know why. He finally looked at her, and there was nothing there. No anger, no sadness, not even pity. Just a vast, empty void. Because you are no longer a necessary part of the equation. The penthouse is sold. The locks will be changed in the morning. Victoria watched, a flicker of grim satisfaction in her eyes. She had won. She had protected her son, her empire, from the grubby little complication. The car will be here in 15 minutes, Damon repeated, turning his back on her to stare out at the storm. To take you, wherever it is you go now. 15 minutes to pack up a life. 15 minutes to process the demolition of her world. She walked numbly into their bedroom, the room where they had made love, where they had dreamed of their child. She ignored the designer clothes, the jewelry, the trappings of a life that was never truly hers. She packed a small bag with a few essentials, her grandmother's locket, and a worn copy of Goodnight Moon she had already bought for the baby. As she walked out of the penthouse for the last time, the doorman, a kind man named George, who had always greeted her with a warm smile, looked at her with pity in his eyes. He hailed a taxi for her, the rain plastering her thin dress to her skin. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, she looked back at the gleaming tower one last time. It wasn't a home. It had only ever been a cage, and now she had been cast out into the storm. The taxi driver's voice cut through her daze. Where to, miss? The question was a punch to the gut. Where did she go? She had no family left, no home, and the few friends she'd had before Damon had drifted away, casualties of her curated isolation. Her bank account, a household allowance provided by Damon, was likely already frozen. She had a few $100s in her purse and the clothes on her back. Swallowing the jagged shard of her pride, she gave the driver the only address she could think of. Oakland, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'll show you the way. An hour later, she stood dripping on the doorstep of Juno's third-floor walk-up in a gritty, vibrant Oakland neighborhood. The building smelled of garlic, incense, and damp laundry. It was a world away from the sterile, ozone-scented air of the penthouse. For a long moment, she couldn't bring herself to knock, the shame of physical weight pinning her feet to the welcome mat. What would she say? Hi, Juno. Remember me? The friend who abandoned you for a rich guy? Well, he just threw me out. Can I sleep on your couch? The door flew open before she could knock. Juno stood there in paint-splattered overalls, a look of shocked concern on her face. See? Oh my God, what happened? Get in here! The moment Juno's arms wrapped around her, the dam broke. Sienna collapsed into her friend's embrace. The sobs she'd been holding back, racking her body in great, shuddering waves. Juno didn't ask questions. She just held her, murmuring soothing words as she guided her inside. Juno's apartment was the polar opposite of the penthouse. It was small, chaotic, and bursting with life. Canvases leaned against every wall, books were stacked in precarious towers, and a half-finished sculpture of reclaimed metal dominated the living room. It was a space that was lived in, loved in. It was real. Juno settled her on a lumpy, comfortable couch, wrapped her in a quilt that smelled of turpentine and lavender, and pressed a mug of hot tea into her trembling hands. It was only then, as the warmth seeped into her bones, that Sienna finally told her everything. The calculated marriage, the cold pregnancy announcement, the business arrangement, the final, brutal exile. Juno listened, her expression shifting from shock to incandescent fury. That son of a bitch, she seethed, her hands clenched into fists. I will end him. I will make a sculpture out of his cold, black heart. But Sienna shook her head, a profound weariness settling over her. It's not worth it, Juno. He's already won. That night, sleeping on Juno's couch, Sienna stared at the unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling. The sounds of the city, sirens, laughter from the street, the rumble of the BART train, were a raw, unfiltered soundtrack to her despair. This was rock bottom. Pregnant, homeless, and utterly alone, save for the one friend she had so carelessly neglected. The shame was a bitter pill, but beneath it, a tiny, unfamiliar feeling began to stir. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was a raw, primal instinct, the instinct to survive. The months that followed were a blur of hardship and humility. The initial shock gave way to the grim reality of her situation. She found a pro bono lawyer who confirmed what she already knew. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed was ironclad. Damon's lawyers were sharks, and she was a minnow. She was entitled to nothing. The pregnancy, once a source of quiet joy, became a terrifying countdown. How could she bring a child into this world with nothing to offer? The fear was a constant companion, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach. She took a menial job washing dishes at a local diner. The long hours on her feet in agony, the pitying looks from her co-workers, a fresh humiliation. She, who had once debated the merits of Manolos versus Louboutins, was now grateful for a free meal at the end of her shift. Asher was born on a sweltering August night in a crowded public hospital. It was a long, difficult labor, and Juno was by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, and fighting like a lioness on her behalf with the overworked nurses. The moment they placed her son on her chest, everything changed. Asher was tiny, perfect, and utterly dependent on her. As she looked into his scrunched-up, beautiful face, the shame, the anger, the heartbreak over Damon, it all receded. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about what she had lost. It was about him. This tiny, warm, breathing miracle was her reason. He was her world now. A different kind of rich, a wealth of purpose and unconditional love that made Damon's billions seem like dust. The reality of single motherhood on the poverty line was grueling. Sleepless nights bled into exhausting days. The apartment was filled with the scent of sour milk and the sound of Asher's cries. Money was a constant worry. She learned to budget down to the last penny, to shop at thrift stores, to accept the kindness of neighbors who would leave bags of hand-me-down baby clothes on their doorstep. She also endured the judgment, the sneers in the grocery line when she paid with food stamps, the intrusive questions from social workers. Yet through it all, there was an unexpected joy. Asher's first smile, the way his tiny hand curled around her finger, the soft gurgle of his laughter. These were moments of pure, unadulterated happiness. In the ashes of her old life, a new one was taking root. One built not on luxury and illusion, but on love, resilience, and the ferocious strength of a mother's bond. In the quiet, pre-dawn hours when Asher was finally asleep, Sienna found solace in the one thing that had always been hers: baking. In Juno's small, cluttered kitchen, she rediscovered the muscle memory of her grandmother's hands, the alchemy of turning simple ingredients, flour, sugar, butter, into something warm and comforting. The scent of cinnamon, cardamom, and vanilla filled the small apartment, a fragrant shield against the harsh realities outside. She baked for Juno as a thank you. She baked for her neighbors. She baked to quiet the anxieties that gnawed at her in the dark. Her grandmother's recipes were her inheritance, a legacy of love and resilience passed down through generations. One day, Juno came home with a proposition. The owner of that coffee shop I work at, the Daily Grind, he tried your Morning Glory muffins. He wants to sell them. He said they were the best damn muffins he's ever had. Sienna's heart skipped a beat. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. The idea of someone paying for something she had created, something that came from her heart and her hands, was terrifying and exhilarating. She started small, waking up at 3 a.m. to bake a dozen muffins before her dishwashing shift. They sold out in an hour. The next day, the owner asked for 2 dozen, then 3. Soon she was baking scones, cookies, and her grandmother's famous cinnamon buns. The dishwashing job became a memory. Her days were now a flurry of flour and sugar, her small income slowly, steadily growing. Juno, with her artist's eye and marketing savvy, saw the potential. You need a brand, Si, a story. They brainstormed names over cheap wine and day-old cookies. It was Juno who came up with it. "The Phoenix Bakery," she said, her eyes shining. "Because you rose from the ashes, my friend. You're stronger and more beautiful than ever." The name was perfect. It was her story. They started an Instagram page, Iwara and the Phoenix Bakery. Juno took beautiful, rustic photos of the baked goods, interspersing them with snippets of Sienna's story. Not the sob story of betrayal, but the triumphant one of resilience, motherhood, and the healing power of a grandmother's recipe book. The narrative was authentic, raw, and deeply compelling. People weren't just buying muffins, they were buying a piece of that story. The growth of the Phoenix Bakery was not a fairy tale explosion of success. It was a slow, arduous, day-by-day grind. It was built on countless small victories and heartbreaking setbacks. There was the month the ancient oven in Juno's apartment finally gave up the ghost. Sienna, devastated, thought it was the end. But her loyal customers from the daily grind and her growing Instagram following rallied. They started a small crowdfunding campaign, and within a week, she had enough for a new, commercial-grade oven. The outpouring of support left her in tears. She wasn't just a baker, she was part of a community. There was the sting of a nasty online review from a food blogger who called her story a manipulative marketing gimmick. For a day, she was crushed, the old insecurities whispering that she was a fraud. But then she read the hundreds of comments from her supporters defending her, sharing their own stories of struggle and comeback. The bad review, ironically, only made her brand stronger. She learned about business on the fly. She taught herself about profit margins, supply chain management, and health code regulations. She negotiated with suppliers, hired her first part-time employee, a single mother from her neighborhood, and learned to be a boss. The naive, dependent woman Damon had married was gone, replaced by a savvy, determined entrepreneur. She was no longer just a survivor, she was a creator, a builder. Her first million wasn't in dollars. It was in the pennies and dimes she painstakingly saved, in the trust she built with her customers, in the million small moments of pride and accomplishment. It was the moment she could finally afford to move out of Juno's apartment and into a small two-bedroom of her own, a few blocks away. The first night in their new home, she held a sleeping Asher in her arms, looked around at the sparse but clean rooms, and felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before Damon. This was hers. She had built this. From the ashes, the phoenix had not only risen, she had learned to fly. 5 years. 5 years of flour-dusted mornings and exhausted, triumphant nights. Asher was a bright, curious 5-year-old with his mother's warm smile and a boundless energy that filled their small home with laughter. The Phoenix Bakery was no longer a home-based operation. It was a local institution. The first brick-and-mortar shop, opened 2 years prior in a trendy Oakland neighborhood, was a roaring success. Its rustic charm, exposed brick, and the ever-present aroma of fresh bread made it a beloved community hub. Just last month, Sienna had signed the lease on a second location, a larger space in the San Francisco's Ferry Building, a stone's throw, ironically, from the gleaming towers of the financial district where Damon's empire resided. Sienna was not the woman who had been cast out into the rain. She was a CEO, a respected business owner, a mother. She was happy, truly and deeply happy, in a way she never could have been in the gilded cage. Her past was a scar, but it no longer ached. It was simply a part of her story, the fire that had forged her. Then the ghost appeared, not in person, but as a headline on the financial news channel playing silently on the television at her bakery. Croft Analytics faces massive lawsuit, stock plummets. Sienna froze, a tray of cooling croissants in her hands. The camera zoomed in on Damon leaving a courthouse, his face pale and drawn, surrounded by a swarm of reporters. He looked older, the arrogant charisma replaced by a brittle tension. The accompanying report detailed accusations of systemic fraud, data manipulation, and unethical practices dating back to the company's inception. His empire, once seemingly invincible, was teetering on the brink of collapse. A strange, numb feeling washed over her. It wasn't satisfaction, not exactly. It was more like the dispassionate confirmation of a long-held suspicion. A house built on such a rotten foundation was always destined to fall. She turned the television off, took a deep breath, and went back to work. It was his world, his mess. It had nothing to do with her or Asher anymore. Or so she thought. A week later, a woman walked into the Oakland bakery. She was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her face etched with a familiar anxiety. It took Sienna a moment to place her. It was Ivy, Damon's sister. "Sienna," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" Sienna led her to the small office in the back, the air thick with the scent of yeast and unspoken history. She remained standing, her arms crossed, a silent barrier between them. Ivy's composure crumbled. Tears welled in her eyes. "I am so sorry, Sienna, for everything. It's a little late for apologies, Ivy." "I know, I was a coward," Ivy admitted, her voice choked with guilt. "I went along with it, with my mother's plan. I was terrified of her, of Damon, but I can't live with it anymore." And then, the whole sordid story came tumbling out, a confession years in the making. The betrayal was far deeper and more calculated than Sienna had ever imagined. It wasn't that Damon had simply fallen out of love with her. He had never been in love with her to begin with. In the early days, Ivy explained, wringing her hands, Damon needed a massive round of funding to get Croft Analytics off the ground. The most promising investor was the Sterling Legacy Fund, a deeply conservative, family-run institution. They didn't just invest in companies, they invested in people, specifically stable, traditional, family men. Sienna felt the blood drain from her face. Damon was a bachelor with a reputation. They were hesitant. So Mother devised a plan. They needed to find him a wife, the perfect wife, someone wholesome, with a clean background, no messy family ties, someone believable, someone who would make him look stable and grounded. Project Nightingale. The name from the folder flashed in Sienna's mind. She had been the nightingale, chosen for her sweet, simple song, destined for a gilded cage. They hired a private investigator. Ivy continued, her voice heavy with shame. They vetted dozens of women. They found you in the library. You were perfect. You were beautiful, intelligent, but not intimidating, kind, and alone. You were the perfect cover. The marriage, the romance, the carefully constructed narrative of his past. It was all a lie. A meticulously executed fraud to secure an investment. The business arrangement wasn't the end of their marriage. It was the entire foundation of it. "What about the baby?" Sienna asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "What about Asher?" "That was the one thing they didn't plan for," Ivy whispered. "The pregnancy was a liability. The Sterling Fund had a strict morality clause. A divorce so soon, especially with a baby on the way, would have triggered an investigation, and everything would have unraveled. But at the same time, the fraud lawsuit that's happening now, the seeds of it were already there. Damon was about to be exposed even back then. He was in a panic. Leaving you, cutting you off completely, was an act of self-preservation. He was cutting the liability before it could bring him down. He chose the company over you, over his own son." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The coldness, the cruelty, the speed of it all. It wasn't personal, it was business. And that somehow was infinitely more monstrous. "Why are you telling me this now, Ivy?" "Because the lawsuit is bringing everything to light. And because you deserve the truth. And Asher deserves to know his story isn't rooted in rejection, but in his father's cowardice. Damon is ruined, Sienna. Financially, professionally, he has nothing left. He's been asking about you." For days, Sienna was adrift in a sea of revived trauma. The new truth was a poison, seeping into the peace she had fought so hard to build. Every memory of her time with Damon was now tainted, recast as a scene in a meticulously staged play. Juno was practical. "Forget him, Si. You owe him nothing. He's drowning in his own filth. Don't let him pull you under." Part of Sienna agreed. The safest thing to do was to walk away, to protect her son, to protect her hard-won life. But another part, a fiercer, stronger part, knew she couldn't. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about standing up and refusing to be erased. It was about showing her son what true strength looked like. Not the blustering power of a billionaire, but the quiet, unshakable courage of a woman who knew her worth. She agreed to meet him, not in a boardroom or a fancy restaurant, but on her own turf. The Phoenix Bakery in Oakland, after hours. He arrived looking like a ghost. The bespoke suit hung on a frame that had lost its arrogant swagger. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by stress and sleepless nights. He looked around the warm, inviting space, at the photos of a smiling Asher on the wall, with a look of profound bewilderment, as if he couldn't comprehend how this world had sprung from the ruins of the one he had created. "Sienna," he began, his voice raspy, "thank you for seeing me." She didn't offer him a seat. She stood behind the counter, the space where she had built her new life, her hands resting on the worn wood. She was no longer the trembling, heartbroken girl he had dismissed. She was his equal. "Why are you here, Damon?" I'm sorry." The words sounded inadequate, hollow in the space between them. "I know that means nothing to you now." "You're right," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It doesn't. For 5 years, I let myself believe you left me because you didn't love me, because I wasn't good enough. The truth, I find, is so much worse. You didn't leave me. You liquidated an asset." He flinched, the truth of her words hitting him like a physical blow. "I'm not here to talk about us," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "There is no us. There never was. I'm here to talk about my son. Your son." She slid a small photo album across the counter. It was filled with pictures of Asher. Asher's first steps. Asher blowing out the candles on his 3rd birthday cake. Asher on his first day of preschool, his small hand clutching hers. Damon opened it, his hands trembling. A guttural sound, a strangled sob, escaped his lips. He sank onto a nearby stool, his head in his hands, as he looked at the vibrant, happy life of the child he had discarded like a piece of corporate refuse. The confrontation wasn't a shouting match. It was quieter, more devastating. It was the calm, irrefutable evidence of the world he had lost, the love he had thrown away for money and power that were now turning to ash. "What do you want, Sienna?" he finally whispered, his voice broken. "Money? I don't have much left, but I'll give you whatever you want." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, Damon, you still don't get it. You still think everything has a price tag." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. "I don't want your money. I want 2 things. First, a public statement, an apology, not to me, to him, an acknowledgement that he exists. Second, you will tell him the truth yourself. When he is old enough to understand, you will sit in front of your son and you will explain what you did. Those are my terms." He looked up at her, his face a mask of utter devastation. In her quiet strength, in her refusal to be bought or broken, he finally saw the true scale of his loss. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost his humanity. And she, in building her life from the rubble, had found it. Damon did as she asked. The public statement was released through his lawyer, a brief, stark admission of a profound personal and moral failure regarding a son he had never known. It was a footnote in the spectacular implosion of his career. But for Sienna, it was everything. It was a public record, an undeniable acknowledgement. Asher wasn't a secret anymore. The lawsuit stripped Damon of the rest of his fortune. Croft Analytics was dismantled, its assets sold off to pay fines and settlements. Victoria Croft, implicated as a co-conspirator in both the corporate fraud and the deception of the Sterling Fund, retreated from public life, a disgraced woman living in a mansion that now felt like a mausoleum. The Croft dynasty was over. Stripped of his power, his wealth, and his arrogance, Damon became a ghost. He moved into a small rented apartment, a place smaller than the master closet of his old penthouse. For the first time in his life, he was truly alone, with nothing but the echoes of his failures for company. It was in this ruin that something unexpected began to happen. Without the sycophants, the pressure, and the intoxicating drug of power, Damon was forced to confront the man in the mirror. He started therapy. He began reading the books he had once collected merely as status symbols. He started a journal, filling it with painful, honest reflections. It was a slow, agonizing process of dismantling the false self he had constructed over a lifetime. His redemption wasn't a sudden epiphany. It was a grueling, day-by-day effort to piece together a conscience from the wreckage. He didn't ask to see Asher right away. He waited a year in which he sent carefully worded, respectful letters to Sienna, not asking for forgiveness, but updating her on his progress, taking responsibility for his actions in a way he never had before. He was learning finally that atonement was not a transaction, but a long, painful journey. Sienna watched from a distance, cautiously optimistic. She had built a fortress around her heart and her son, but she also believed in the possibility of change. When Damon finally asked if he could meet Asher, she agreed. The meeting took place in a neutral public park. Asher, now 6, was curious about the quiet, sad man his mother had told him was his father. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic Hollywood reunions. It was awkward and tentative. Damon didn't try to buy his son's affection with expensive gifts. Instead, he got down on his knees and talked to Asher about squirrels. He pushed him on the swings. He listened, really listened, as Asher chattered on about his favorite superhero. Sienna never took him back. The romantic love she once felt for him was long dead, buried under years of lies and betrayal. But she recognized the flicker of genuine change in him, the painful, humbling effort he was making. For Asher's sake, she made a courageous choice. She allowed Damon to begin the slow, cautious process of being a father. Their new family dynamic was complex and unconventional. Damon became a regular, quiet presence in Asher's life. He would show up for soccer games, help with homework, and take him to the science museum on weekends. He and Sienna communicated with a polite, respectful distance, co-parents bound by their shared love for their son. He saw the life Sienna had built, the thriving business, the loving home, the community that surrounded her, and he understood that it was a world he could be a small part of, but never possess. The story's end was not a fairy tale reunion. It was something more real, more profound. It was a testament to the fact that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about accepting the past and choosing a different future. Sienna's empire continued to grow. The Phoenix Bakery became a celebrated brand, known as much for its social conscience, hiring single mothers, sourcing locally, donating to women's shelters, as for its delicious pastries. She became a symbol of resilience, a woman who had turned the deepest betrayal into her greatest strength. Her past was no longer a source of shame. It was the foundation upon which she had built her life, her business, and her identity. She was Sienna Monroe, a mother, a CEO, a survivor, and she was finally free. In the end, Sienna's story wasn't about the millionaire who left her, but about the woman she became in his absence. It's a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals are the very things that force us to discover a strength we never knew we had. From the ashes of a life built on lies, she built an empire of her own, founded on truth, community, and the enduring power of a mother's love. She proved that the most valuable comeback isn't about stunning those who wronged you, but about building a life that truly, finally makes you happy. If Sienna's journey from heartbreak to triumph moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and redemption.